Welcome to One Work, Five Questions with Donna Vitek, that's me, and Dr. Mark Andrew Holowchak, that's him.
That is I.
Thank you for joining us,
The
Dr.
verb to be
Holowchak.
takes the nominative case, Miss Vitek. So
What?
it's literally that is I,
Oh,
and I say it is I for me and stuff like that. Sounds
oh,
clumsy, right?
yeah,
There's your grammar lesson for the day.
oh
And
boy.
that
Well, we
plays
have
out in a lot of languages, by the way.
history and grammar today.
Yeah, I can't help it.
That's okay.
I'm a butthole that way. Right, Jeff?
So, welcome to our show. And today's topic will be Thomas Jefferson's 1774 summary view of British America, which I did not know existed until you asked me to read it. And now I just opens up a whole can of worms here and a whole new outlook on Mr. Jefferson.
Yeah,
But
it's a book. It's a work you have to read to understand Jefferson. If you want to understand his declaration, you want to understand the development of his political thinking, you have to read this, have to study it too.
yeah. Well, before we get started, I always like to tell Dr. Holowchak's credentials. So those of you who may want to gather information for research or writing a paper, publishing, you do have a credentialed PhD, retired professor of philosophy and history that will give information. He's taught at institutions such as University of Pittsburgh, University of Michigan, Rutgers University, Camden, and Ohio University. Now, I have this all memorized, but I still have to read my script. He's the editor of Thomas Jefferson, Journal of Thomas Jefferson and His Time, and the author of numerous published books. And what is the most recent one that you just received?
It's called Thomas Jefferson Notes on Virginia, Prolegomena, and that's the one I think you put up last time. We'll be going to his notes on Virginia, so I'll show everybody. We'll put up a copy. It's a beautifully covered book, and I think it's a beautifully written book. By the way, I put a lot of effort into that, so we'll talk a little bit about that next time.
Okay.
It's been really productive for me. I mean, I already have 3 books out on Jefferson this year, and hopefully a couple more. One more.
Wow. That's great. I love it. I just, even after a year, I still feel like I know him better than I did a year ago, but I still don't think I know him as well as, I mean, it's going to take, well, it's going to take time.
Yeah, it takes years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing the show won't hurt.
Dr. Holowchak has close to 155 essays on Thomas Jefferson. Then the books and the books and essay locations will be in the description of the video.
I would change that to about 175.
175, let me change that.
As you saw this morning, another one got published, and then yesterday another one got published.
Oh, right, in the Journal of American Revolution.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, so some of these are informal essays, but I like to write informally these days. It's just I've proven myself I don't have to write in the big journals and avoid the stodginess and the referees. The fun about writing in a professional journal is you get referees, and I mean no disrespect by this, but you get referees who know a hell of a lot less about Thomas Jefferson, and your paper, the fate of your paper is is it up to them. So there's a sort of irony to that, I guess, a strangeness to it.
Right. Yeah. That it's very discouraging. But we're willing to fight. So with our show, One Work, 5 Questions, I'll ask Dr. Holowchak 5 questions on one work of Thomas Jefferson's. And today we will discuss the 1774 summary view of British America. Now, Thomas Jefferson, I did not know, he wrote this, and this was 2 years prior to the Declaration of Independence, which one of my questions, we'll get into the questions about how much of this was an inspiration to the Declaration of Independence, but this written document, from what I understand, was intended for the First Continental Congress, their eyes only, and it somehow leaked out, and then it was published in England, and it it rubbed the king the wrong way. So it wasn't intended to be a public document when he wrote this, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it was written for the First Continental Congress. And I guess they liked it so much, it ended up spread around, and it made him quite the rebellious one, the rebel.
It was a
So
real radical. It was considered
radical.
radical for its day. Not
Yeah.
everybody liked it. I mean, the people fighting for independence certainly, or hostile to England at the time, loved it, but it was radical.
Yeah, and when we go through the questions and we'll see his position, his political position, and for him to write such a document was uh, to me it was very good for the what would become America. That he was really looking out for the people. And that's what I think I like most about him, is that he's really looking out for the common good of the people, not the elites. He's not protecting the elites. He's really interested in
Well,
the.
he thinks government should be for the sake of the general citizenry. And in that regard, we'll talk more about my book, The Disease of Liberty, covers that in great detail at some
Okay.
point. And I'm going to be finishing that up probably by next week.
And what is the
Really,
title of that? The
The
Disease of
Disease
Liberty?
of Liberty, roughly titled, but Thomas Jefferson on history, uh, and the contagion of liberty. I don't know if the secondary title is going to be.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Well, we'll be sure to share that with everyone.
Well, it's
When,
not going to be published for a while, so it's got to get more polished and things. But
yeah, if I stop emailing you between 9 and 1 every day, that would help, right?
that would help. Yeah.
Okay, so I am Donna Vitek, and this is One Work, 5 questions. Are you ready for question 1, Dr. Holowchak?
Let's rock. I got Jack
Okay.
in my lap.
What was the purpose of writing the summary view, and were his views expressed considered radical at that time? For instance, him blaming the king on not stopping slavery.
Well, you in part answered that already in your introduction. The individual colonies were going to band together, get together through sending delegates to Philadelphia. And I think Georgia was the only state or the only colony at the time that didn't do so. They wanted to discuss matters, and the delegates were to be given, at least for Virginia, the delegates were to be given roughly a set of instructions. And that's what the Notes on Virginia was, a sort of set of instructions from the perspective of Virginia to members of this newly forming Continental Congress for just what the gripes were. So, Jefferson writes that out, and that's that. So the other thing is, you said something about what? Slavery?
Yes, yes. If, for instance, him blaming the king for not stopping slavery, I understand during this time, when Jefferson was practicing law, he did help some slaves that were petitioning the court for their freedom. He defended them.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was at least 5 cases pro bono, which he didn't ask for any money, where he was arguing for. In one of the most famous cases, he argues that all men by nature are free, by nature.
Mhm.
And the case was George Wythe, his buddy and hero, was on the other side. The case was thrown out. I mean, in some sense, it was awarded to Wythe. Jefferson's argument that all men by nature are free was just swept under the rug, right? So he did. Now, this is I have to go to the book here. The problem with slavery was he blames the king for slavery in as much as he says that His Majesty possesses the power of refusing to pass into a law any bill which has already passed the other 2 branches of legislature. So if the bill passes the Parliament, the Majesty can put his negative on it. He can negate the bill. And well, he hasn't refused to done that. He has refused to do that, I should say. Right. He says the abolition of domestic slavery is the great object of desire in those colonies where it was unhappily introduced into their infant state. Right. I mean, so is he right just to blame the king? I don't think he's exclusively blaming the king. He's just saying, look, you have the power to negate this if you wanted. And like it or not, the slave trade was stopped, probably not for humanitarian reasons, but because it was at some point, well, humanitarian reasons played a large role, but as well, it ceased to become profitable. There was opposition to it, as well as, it was not as profitable as it used to be. But you can bark all you want about something's immorality, but if people are making money by doing it, there's a huge disincentive to not do anything about it.
We still see that today.
Absolutely.
A lot of ways people make money are not, by virtue. Okay. Question number 2. What was Jefferson's political position when he wrote this?
Wow, that's a rather loaded question. There are many elements to it. Let me see. On the one hand, one of the things is he's lecturing the king. And so the first point I can make, and I'll throw in a little Latin here, is that he tells the king in 2 places, he is no more than primus inter pares. Primus means Latin for first, inter pares between equals, first among equals. So you're just another fish in the sea who happens to be the king of the people. And as such, you're a steward of the people. You're not someone who's above the people. You're just in a position where you're temporarily, like the president, I said, you're temporarily above them insofar as you have powers that other people don't. But those powers are really delegated to you by the citizenry. He says, in the first paragraph, he says, he is no more than the chief officer of the people, appointed by the laws and circumscribed with definite powers to assist in working the great machine of government, erected for their use and consequently subject to their superintendents. He, let's see if I can find another place where he talks about the king. Yeah, he right at the end in the last paragraph says, kings are the servants, not the proprietors of the people. Right? So here he is, a common, he thinks he's Welsh, and he's probably British, but here he is, just someone sent, his ancestors said, he's lecturing the king about what the king's duties are. So you mentioned that this essay gets in the hands, is published in the Congress, gets in the hands of, published in England, and King really loved it, I'm sure.
Right.
George III hated Jefferson because of that. So you have that. Then you have the issue of feudalism versus alloidialism. Feudalism meant, that a kingdom was broken down into a bunch of lands, each possessed by a lord. And on the lord's lands, there would be a bunch of peasants who would, in effect, work for the lord and be under the direction of the lord. So the peasants had no rights and owned no land, and everything they did was for their lord. And the lords had a status somewhat independent of the king. So you had the feudalism, which to which Jefferson refers here oftentimes. And alloidialism is the notion what the Saxons sort of brought in prior to the Normans, is that there's no feudalism, there's no lords, no person is lord over another person. What makes property one's own is that one sits on the land, one works the land, one is ready to defend the land. Those sorts of things.
Defend the land is a key thing, because they didn't have property deeds back then. Like now, you buy property, you get a deed that shows ownership. Back then, there weren't no deeds.
Yeah,
so
now with property deeds, you buy a parcel of land, right, and then the government taxes you to death for everything that you own. Tax you on your house, on your car, on your license plates, and then they tax you on your food. Everything you buy, then they tax you on your check.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. That's that big government that we need. Big government, big taxes. Let me say, look, another principle I try to is he says, from the very nature of things, every society must at all times possess within itself the sovereign powers of legislation. Right, the feelings of human nature revolt against everything being otherwise. Right, and right in this area, he talks about alloidalism, and he talks about feudalism as well. He talks about so I mean, the idea is societies must be able in possession of self-government. And here we have the general case where you have England, Parliament dictating laws and the king, not negating them and passing laws that have a bearing on the colonists over thousands, 3,000 miles. How big is the Atlantic Ocean? Some 3,000 miles or so, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
So there are problems here, right? How do you govern over 3,000 miles? Right. You couldn't text the king, couldn't pick up your cell phone. I mean, I should pick up my cell phone as a demonstration, but
you don't have a cell phone.
Well, my cell phone is about as interesting as the library document. Well, let's say non-existent. Jeffrey just jumped on. Yeah, so I mean, the king couldn't text. Right. I don't think he could. Maybe he had a cell phone because he was all powerful, but the other people didn't have a cell phone. So I mean, you have that. Let me think. And so the problem of, you want to come up there? Go. The problem was, what if there's an immediate problem, right? And for the most urgent problems, the king had to give his approbation, his approval.
Right.
So, you have this immediate problem comes up. So what do? You send a messenger on a boat, 3,000 miles over there, get the king's response, and then wait for another 3,000 miles. You might not get a response for a year. Right. And when problems are pressing, it's not a very efficient form of government. So at one point, you can see it's just not going to work anymore. If the colonists are not going to have any say in the direction of how they're governed, it's not going to work because it's horribly inefficient. And Jefferson says that in some place. He says here, can one reason be assigned why 160,000 electors in the Isle of Great Britain should give law to 4 millions in the states of America, every individual of whom is equal to every individual of them in virtue, in understanding, bodily strength? So he is complaining about, we have no representation. They're dictating, they don't even know what's going on, and then they're dictating, legislating for us. So why is it that they should be legislating? That's a big problem.
Well, that's proven in history too, with even Mexico and Texas. Wasn't that a problem with the people, the Mexicans that were in what is now known as Texas? They were not happy with the Mexican government. They felt neglected, and that was connected.
The Texicans didn't like it. Actually, I actually did quite a bit of reading on the history of Texas because I lived there for a couple of years, and I fell in love with Texas. And
me too. Yeah, I
too. That was a similar. And then the same thing is that the Mexican ruler thought himself the Napoleon of the West. He thought he was a brilliant general, and Sam Houston showed him otherwise, that he wasn't so brilliant. Anyways, he writes, one of my favorite Jefferson quotes talks about, it's the last thing I'll say to answer this question, but running out of brain power here. He says the British dominions in Europe, and that the colonists are possess a right which nature has given to all men of departing from the country in which chance, not choice, I like the chance, not choice, the way it sounds, alliteration, has placed them. So what Jefferson is talking about is a natural right to expatriate. I'm born into the United States.
Right.
If I don't like it here, I have a natural right to pack up my bags and go somewhere else.
Right.
And, we think, think much of it. It bothers me. We've talked about this, the people who bitch about this country. And how many people today, well, let's bring communism into the, I'm writing on Soviet Russia. You don't like it. You have an opportunity to leave.
Right.
Instead of tearing everything down. There are problems with this damn country. You know that, and I know that.
Yeah.
But destroying it verbally is not going to solve it. You can express your opinions, but it's very easy. Negative views are very easy to articulate. The difficult thing is to say something positive. Same thing in philosophy. It's very easy to be a skeptic and destroy philosophical systems that someone puts up, like Kant's. Even I can do that. But if you ask Holowchak, could you come up with something as world-shattering as Kant's complete metaphysical system and his ethical? No, I don't possess that intelligence. So we have a chance and choice have. And he does say later in there, he says, look, and this is the interesting thing, when Jamestown and the first colonists settled, this was all private enterprise. I don't know if you know that. King didn't give these people money to go at and experiment with trying to establish colonies on the new. And it was a very dangerous thing. Most of the people sent there died. They had to keep sending boatloads of new people, who were mainly Irish people, prostitutes, criminals, other unworthy people, the Irish, and stuff like that, as well as some aristocrat Britons who probably were not first born and wouldn't get an inheritance. The king put no money into this. It's only when things started to work out after decades, the king says, hey, I'm interested. Cut me in.
Right. Oh, that's what I also learned too from this reading, was the people paid their way that first came over here. Like you said, it wasn't a British sponsored
Well,
trip.
it was private industry that backed this, and the idea is that the people on the boats were given all sorts of incentives to. And there were a lot of aristocratic people, and the problem with that is, what's characteristic of an aristocrat? I don't get my fingers dirty with menial work. So what are you going to do? And John Smith, comes up and says, no work, no food. So there are all sorts of, I don't want to get into that, but the idea is, so we already see something different done there, where if you're a lazy ass aristocrat, you don't want to give in your share of the work, then the hell with you. We have no need for you here.
Right.
So we're already getting away from the stratification that we see, especially in French culture, and to a lesser extent British culture, of the well-to-do and the well-born and the peasants, the other people.
Wow. This opened up so much. Okay. Are we ready for question number 3?
I guess.
Okay.
Are you ready enough?
Was this what landed him the position of writing the Declaration of Independence?
Yes.
Okay.
How's that for an answer?
Okay. Next question.
Prechylagus. Here's a word. It's very prechylagus.
It's very what?
Short answer. Succinct.
Oh, okay.
Economical, whatever you want to call it.
So
That's
we have
your word of the day. Prechylagus.
so you get history, grammar, and vocabulary in our sessions.
Yeah, whether you want them or not. That's the fun part.
I found all of the notes. Remember when we first met? I used to take.
Well, I'll tell you what. Every time I get a book published, one of the reviewers always complains about here's another sesquipedality, having words that are a foot and a half long when you can put in. So I get to the habit of having a qualification in my preface saying, I apologize for my sesquipedality, and I'll try to, which means using larger words. And I'll try to get away from that insofar as that's my DNA will allow for it. I'll always put something in that.
Yeah.
But I think I told you before, do I use those words, for arrogant, pompous reasons? Perhaps, I don't know, maybe I do subconsciously, but the idea is study, 7 different languages, and you learn words, and I like to use them.
Right.
I told you before, if I'm a collector of cars and I have 20 cars, I'm not going to drive one and put 19 in a garage somewhere. I'm going to drive every one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. I like that you do that, because my vocabulary has improved as a result of that. So
Has been corrupted. But your formal answer is yup.
Yep. Well, I would say
rather quickly. You're right to ask that question, because he gained such a reputation,
that's what
especially
I was
among
going to
the
just say.
radicals, that they thought, well, this guy has a very, very beautiful pen, eloquent, very eloquent expression. And sure, and Adams, when they formed a 5-person committee on the Declaration, and they asked all these members, and Adams, according to his own autobiography, tells Jefferson, "We want you to write it." And the reasons given, 2 of which are, I'm universally hated, you're universally liked. And he goes, "You're a 10 times better writer than I am."
Plus, you already have it halfway written from the summary view, so you just
Yeah,
take
right.
that.
It's really, you see the similarities. He's drawing right from the summary view. So when people are saying he's borrowing and stealing he's borrowing
From
his
himself.
largely from himself. You see some of the same phrases in there.
Yeah, well, that's what question, we'll get to that in question number 5, because I was very curious. Well, how long, do you know how long it took him to write the Declaration? It wasn't.
Yes, I remember right off the top. The Declaration you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or the summary view?
No, the Declaration.
I
thought
have
it was
it.
a few
Something like
days.
7, over a month.
Oh, over a month.
I
Okay.
can't remember, but he sat at.
So that's probably why, though, he wrote it. Because if I had to write the Declaration of Independence, I'd still be working on it today. It'd be 10 years before it would be done. But
he was at
maybe
7th
that's
and Market Streets in Philadelphia, in the 3rd floor of a building, I believe, and I think it was 5 weeks. I may be wrong, but I've written on this 100 times, that my feeble old memory just doesn't remember
you
that.
can't keep it. That's one thing with history. There's so much that you can't remember everything.
Not everything, unless you're pressed to
You just have to know where to go look for it. That's it. And you can find that in Dr. Holowchak's books. Okay, question number 4, right? We're on question number 4. Jefferson makes mentions of restrictions King George II placed on the colonies during his reign. And is his beef more with King George II or the 3rd? Because I always thought it was the 3rd, but he did mention the 2nd.
His beef is with coercive government, with kings overstepping there. It doesn't matter if King George II, King George III,
coercive government,
or Jennifer Ampersand the First. Anybody
I know.
who's
she couldn't make it today, by the way. She wanted to be here, but yeah.
I'm sure.
She had a doctor's appointment.
Well, one of these days you have to tell me what she looks like. She looks like anything like Jennifer Aniston. Is that her name? Yeah, so maybe we can have her on the show someday. But it doesn't matter who. I can give you. He talks about many. You're not alluding to. You're literally explicitly referring to certain charges he has against George II, where here's one. He says, an act passed in the 5th year of his reign of the late Majesty King George II, an American subject is forbidden to make a hat for himself of the fur which he has taken perhaps on his own soil. So I have my own soil. I hunt and I, get fur from an animal, whatever sort of animal, mink or something, and I can't make a hat of fur from that animal, right? I am forbidden by law. Another act passed in the 23rd year, the iron which we make, we are forbidden to manufacture, as heavy as that article is. And so I think the idea here is that the iron the iron which we make needs to be sent to England to be manufactured, and then the manufactured goods are sent back. So obviously this is to monopolize, to put the colonists in a state of subjection, of abject subjection to the king. So they're very noticeable restrictions put on what they can and cannot do, economic restrictions. And I always argue, at least in my old age, I come to realize that like Putin's war in Ukraine, there are historical antecedents that, Russians always thought of Ukraine as little Russia, but the main reason for this is not only Putin's pathology, sees himself as a great, great man like Stalin, but economic reasons. I just gave you a couple examples of that.
Okay.
So he's worried about the king usurping his powers.
Okay. So right. So let's not focus on which king it was. It's the king.
It doesn't matter. He's arguing against any arbitrary power that assumes what is a right by nature
Right.
is a kingly, Thomas Hobbes and all people like that would talk about, in his Leviathan, that the king is empowered by God and no one has a right to dispute anything the king says because he's divinely inspired. And that's a view that many just believe, that you don't argue with the king. He knows what he's talking about.
Right. Okay. Oh, I'm having a little technical issues here with my PowerPoint presentation. I'm sorry.
Better
I'm
you
trying.
than me.
Yeah. Question number 5. Jefferson states, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time." Is this the precursor for his declarations, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
Well, there's an antecedent in John Locke and other writings. Locke argues for life, liberty, and pursuit of property. But
Okay.
this is a sort of understanding Locke's ideas were floating around at the time. And Jefferson puts in, so God gave us life, gave us liberty at the same time. Notice the linkage of life and liberty.
Mhm.
Probably even more than Locke, Jefferson's. I don't know if that's quite right to say, but he is probably the foremost American liberal of his day. And I call him a liberal eudaemonist because that's a topic for another question, but he sort of marries the ancient Greek communitarianism, which was the city, the state, the nation, the Greeks, the polis was above and of a higher status than all the individuals and the sum of the individuals. So he has that element in it, right? But he's also a liberal in the sense he says everything is really done for the sake of the individuals. These are two inconsistent views. Jefferson makes them consistent with his moral sense.
Mhm.
Talk about that. In other words, I literally am, everything is done for the sake of all the individuals. That's what matters in a political society.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, each individual has a moral sense, and the moral sense links every individual with every individual at a higher plane. So there's a sense of me sacrificing my own interests to help other people.
Mhm.
Then comes Jesus. Notice how we could talk of this again. This brings morality and religion back in. Remember, religion is just naturalized. Morality is naturalized religion. Duties to God, duties to our fellow human beings. Jefferson grounds his whole political system, and no one has gotten this because they don't want to look at morality seriously. Everything Jefferson does is grounded in morality.
Mhm.
So in a sense, there's an interplay between Lockean atomism and individualism for the sake of the individuals and the early classical republicanism where the individuals are for the sake of the society. There's an interplay, if you want, the dynamism between the two.
Hmm. Very interesting. Um,
It's
okay.
technical.
It is. It is. It's much deeper than just the first
Yeah,
glance.
I'm establishing in my newer book in this last week, I've been underscoring connections that I haven't underscored. I made these connections before, but I have failed to flesh out the implications fully. So it's, like I said, you can read this again. You can read it 40 times and find something new each time.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned now you made reference to one of your books, but this summary view, can it be found in the Scholars, Thomas Jefferson?
It's in there, yeah.
Okay.
There are all the, it says vital writings of the vital, they're all the most important political, religious, ethical, educational,
Okay.
and other writings that might be of interest where Jefferson's talking about John Adams. There's a whole section, Collectania, where you can just look up John Adams and Jefferson's writes about Adams as a person in letters. Not
Oh,
just
wow.
Adams, so it's like an encyclopedia of the last section.
Okay, so anyone, what type of student or scholar or professor would this book be of value?
This would be great if you taught a class on Thomas Jefferson. This would be great if you just love Thomas Jefferson and want to be exposed in a very user-friendly way to his political philosophy, his educational philosophy, and his moral views and his religious views, which I grouped together because I said
Okay.
really religion for him. One of the big big points of my new book is that Jefferson's political philosophy is religiously grounded. Here's a guy who doesn't believe in a God to whom you would pray, but yet, given that everything is founded on what makes a society thrive, right?
Mhm.
Everything is founded on, and he says this at places, on morality.
Right.
And if naturalized religion just as morality, Jefferson is really giving us he's offering us a redefinitional view of what religion is, and in his own way, by his own redefinition, his republicanism is religiously structured in his own way.
Okay.
Jesus being the prototype Jefferson citizen. That kind of weird?
So well, I think this book would be beneficial to people that want to learn more about Thomas Jefferson before believing and listening to the current stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to just focus on the fact that he owned slaves and not what he did to try to free them.
We're going to talk about that next week.
Yeah, so I like this. I think, before you form an opinion on Thomas Jefferson, maybe read this, grab this book.
That's what bothered me when I got into Jefferson scholarship over a decade ago. Is as a philosopher, principally, you read primary sources. Whenever I teach, I don't read what philosophers write about Plato. I have my students read Plato. Right. There are problems with just translating from the Greek anyway. The problem is that when you get philosopher A writing about an earlier philosopher like Plato, how do we know that his take is correct?
Mm-hmm.
Let's read Plato and work through it ourselves. I don't trust secondary literature. And if you read Jefferson scholarship, like you're talking about, we understand why you shouldn't trust it, because people twist and turn,
right,
manipulate things to satisfy their own political desires.
And we have it's not like we don't have the work or the means of doing it, because he did write a lot, and all of it has been saved.
Yeah, so your point is well taken. If you want to understand Jefferson, read Jefferson first. Start reading.
Go right to the horse's mouth.
Go to the horse's mouth and then start reading secondary literature. That's what blew me away, because I came to realize people writing on Jefferson don't really read him carefully. They read him in a tendentious, I don't know what that means either, in a way that is in keeping with their own political gains.
Well, I noticed that in graduate school, when I would read work written by someone and they would make claims about Jefferson as if it were fact. And I'm thinking, but you haven't read XYZ that explains what you're talking about and this isn't true. And that really bothered me, that people that we're supposed to be able to trust
can't be trusted.
Can't be right. So it was difficult weeding through the politically motivated writings and the genuine scholarship, and that's why I found you. I just that's why it was important for me to find you and to connect with you, because I noticed yours was not.
Okay, we're running out of time. We're
politically driven. Okay, so our next episode is Thomas Jefferson's Query 18, right? 18.
And if you put up the last slide, I'll talk a little. I'll set up a little teaser. Okay. Jefferson Query 18 asks for the manners and customs in Virginia. Jefferson writes about one and only one thing: the effects of slavery on slave owners and on slaves. That shows you the extent to which slavery was a pressing issue for him. So we'll talk about that.